Hi everyone. Today we're going to continue learning about responses to environments. Specifically today we're going to be looking at something called tropisms, which are plant responses to the environment. If you were to need me, the best way to get a hold of me is my email address, which you'll see on the screen. It's rcrawford@jcpsmail.org. If you haven't already, go ahead and pause the video, gather your materials. You'll need a pencil, your science notebook, and some color pencils. Let's start out with a review. So our first review question is name the life process where organisms take in, break down, and absorb food or nutrients. So what is that life process? I hope at this point you're thinking of Mrs. Green, the little old lady. Of course, that life process is nutrition. The last time we talked about plants making their own food, and plant nutrition is all about that process. Our next review question is name that process that plants use to make their food. It's a topic of our entire last video. We looked at it in great detail. Of course, I'm talking about photosynthesis. The process plants use to make their own food is photosynthesis. Our third question is name the green chemical in plants that traps energy in sunlight for food making. So we know that food making happens in the leaves. We know that leaves are green because they have so much of this chemical. I called it the magic chemical because it's able to trap energy in sunlight and turn it into something that's usable by living things. Hopefully you were able to remember that's chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is found in the leaf, every cell of the leaf, and they're contained in these structures called chloroplasts, these cell parts. So chlorophyll. And finally, name the two raw materials that plants must gather from their environment to make food. Remember, the food they make is just a type of sugar called glucose. But what do plants need to absorb from their environment to be able to make food? Of course, we're talking about carbon dioxide, which is absorbed through the leaves, and water, which will be absorbed from the soil via the roots. Okay, so let's take a look at these tropisms. So here's our lesson objectives today. Sort of short list today. I need you to be able to explain what a tropism is. So what is a tropism? I also want you to be able to list 5 important types of tropisms and what stimulus causes each of them. So name the tropisms, but then be able to say what stimulus, what change in the environment causes this response in a plant. I want you to explain how each plant root and shoot systems respond to a stimulus. In other words, I need you to be able to identify, are the roots having a positive response or a negative response? Is the shoot having a positive response or a negative response? All right, let's take a look at some tropisms. So tropos simply means to turn. And tropism is just a word. It's a special name for plant responses. So when plants are responding to their environment, we call that response a tropism. Now, for plants, responding to their environment, just like reproduction, presents some special problems, as we've talked about in the past. And as you know, plants can't move around their environment. They are rooted to the ground. So for them to respond to their environment without movement, it's going to require it to be a little different than it is for animals. So plant responses, most often, since they're rooted to ground, are going to involve bending, aka turning, remember tropos, bending or growing towards or away from a stimulus. So if it's growing towards a stimulus, we might say that's going to be a positive response. If it's growing away from a stimulus, that would be a negative response. So this bending or turning is how plants can respond to their environment. If we look at the image, we can see these look like tomato plants to me. And we can see that we have a light source, and those tomato plants all seem to be bending or turning toward the light. Let's take a look at this a little further. So there are some stimuli that are very important to plants, and it has to do with survival. And we already know that plants need to gather some raw materials for photosynthesis from their environment, but they're rooted to the ground. So how are they going to respond? Well, they're going to use these plant behaviors called tropisms. So what are some things that plants need to respond to? Well, first off, if light is needed for photosynthesis, plants need to be able to respond to light. So if we look also, gravity. Now, gravity may seem a little strange at first, but plants also need to be able to respond to gravity because that also helps them gather raw materials for photosynthesis. We'll take a look at this tropism in detail. Plants also, as the plant here in this picture, you can see it doing, plants also need to be able to respond to water. Water is one of those raw materials or those ingredients needed for plants to make their own food, and so plants need to be able to respond to water. Some plants are able to respond to touch. So some plants can respond directly to touch, positive or negative. Other plants, not all, but some other plants can also respond to the sun. So let's take a look at these specific examples of plants responding to these different types of stimuli. All right, so we're going to begin with something called phototropism, and this happens in all plants. The prefix photo there at the beginning before tropism simply means light. And a phototropism is when a plant bends or grows in response to light. So if we look at this picture, we can see that we have a lamp that's producing light, and we can see what looks like corn or some type of grass is growing toward the light. And of course, if it's growing toward it, that would be a positive response. So plant shoots grow towards light. This is a positive response. Of course, this is just going to help them collect the energy that they need that's in sunlight for photosynthesis. But all plants also have a negative response. And that negative response is for plant roots to grow away from light. So plant roots will grow away. Now, this negative response helps the roots go deeper, helps keep them hidden from the light, keeps them in the soil where they're able to absorb water, also for photosynthesis. So phototropism is plant response or growth in response to light. And we have a positive response, which will be in the shoot system, and a negative response, which will be in the root system. Some of you may have had an experiment like this or watched an experiment like this. This is very easy to set up. You can look at this picture and gather how it might happen. You can see that this person has planted, these look like bean seeds to me, in a small cup, and then they have made a maze with cardboard. They've made a maze in the box to where the plant had to solve the maze, so to speak. Once they had built the maze inside out of the cardboard shelves there, they went ahead and closed the box off. So they sealed the box so that it was completely dark, all except for that hole that would be up at the very top. And so the plant was able to solve the maze because it showed phototropism. It grew toward the light. So geotropism, on the other hand, the prefix geo means earth. All plants exhibit geotropism. We can see here in this animated GIF, in this animation, that this plant, the pot was standing upright. The pot was laid over, the container that it's in was laid over on its side, and the plant responded to that. You can see the plant stem turning, and it is actually growing upwards, away from gravity. So geotropism, which is in all plants, is plant bending or growth in response to gravity. And so we have a couple of different types. Plant stems, as we can see here in this animated GIF, plant stems tend to grow away from gravity. That is a negative response. If they're growing, gravity always pulls things down. So if they grow away from gravity, that's going to help them get more leaves into the sunlight. Once again, this is about collecting of sunlight for photosynthesis. Plant roots, which we can't see in this animation, plant roots actually have a positive response to gravity. Plant roots are going to grow, always trying to grow downward. So plants have receptors that are able to help them sense which way is down, and plant roots will grow toward the pull of gravity, and plant stems will grow away from the pull of gravity. Positive and negative responses, geotropism. So this is all about gathering those resources. Of course, we also have plants responding to water. The prefix hydro means water. All plants respond to water. And if we were to look at this image, we can see that in the experiment, we've got a container. The plants are in there. And if you notice, we have a watering source where water is always at. and then the other side of the tank would be not getting any water, we can see that the roots on one side of the plant are much longer. Those roots are growing in response to water. They're growing to reach that water. Plants need water for survival. It's also, in addition to other things, they also use it as a raw material for photosynthesis. So the prefix hydro means water. Hydrotropism happens in all plants. And hydrotropism is once again just that bending of growth in response to water. We don't really have for most plants, we don't have a negative response to water. It's vital to life for them. But plant roots do have a positive response to water. So the root organ system, always has a positive response and grows towards water. Okay? All right. So Thigmotropism. Thigmotropism does not happen in all plants. This is a local plant that you may have seen outside before. This is something called mimosa. And you can see that when this mimosa plant is touched, and this is not slowed down, you can see that the leaves will actually close off. The prefix thigmo means touch. Thigmotropism is plant bending or growth in response to touch. Okay, and so plants like the mimosa are going to move away from touch. And it's often thought that this is some sort of adaptation to avoid herbivores, plant eaters. So if a plant gets brushed against and it closes its leaves off, maybe that makes it less likely to be eaten by these plant-eating animals. We also have another type of thigmotropism, which happens in some plants, and you can see, and maybe you've seen this before. This is a time-lapse video. We can see that some plant stems, absolutely twirl into the air until they touch something, and once they touch something, they begin to coil around it. This is very typical for things like vines. They will spin their shoot system, the leading end of their shoot system, around in the air until they touch something, and once they do, they begin to coil around it. And vines are generally plants that have relatively flexible stems on them, and so they need to be able to coil around something and grow on either another plant or something else. And so this coiling response is a type of thigmotropism. The last tropism we'll look at, and this doesn't also happen in some plants, is something called heliotropism. Helio means sun, and a heliotropism is when a plant bends or grows in response to the sunlight, in response to the sun. So if we look at this huge field of sunflowers, the sunflower blossoms, the blooms, the sunflower heads, actually will follow the sun and will turn to face toward it as the sun travels across the sky from east to west. So this is a good example of heliotropism. This, of course, is a positive response. The positive response is these sunflowers turning to face the sun. Other plants, like mostly in deserts, this is found, other plants might have a negative response to the sun. Some desert plants will actually turn their leaves away from the hot sun to help conserve water. Some of you know that transpiration is where plants lose water. It's sort of like plant sweating. And so if they can manage to maybe not heat up as much, and if you're in a desert environment where water is scarce, there's not a lot of it, heliotropism is a negative response where they actually turn away from the sun and or bend away from the sun. So we don't have a ton of notes for this time. I do want you to pause the video, and I want you to copy these notes exactly into your notebook. And so we have the general tropism and the 5 different types of tropism. Please note that photo, geo, and hydrotropism are all present in all plants, whereas thigmo and heliotropism are only present in some plants. Go ahead and pause your video and copy your notes. All right, so this is a lab that could take several days, but it's a pretty fun lab to play with. We're going to try to play with tropisms, and this might even take as long as a couple of weeks or longer. So simple to do. You just need 3 small cups. They don't need to be special anyway. You can even look through your recycling. I want you to fill them almost to the top with dirt. You do not need to have some sort of special potting soil, just some dirt. And you're going to need some bean seeds. Now, you may not have seeds that came in a seed packet, but most of you might have some dried beans in your kitchen that will work just as well. Those dried beans that sometimes you cook to eat will work very well. If you don't have beans, you can use things like peas or anything else as well. Beans are the best, but peas could work. So I want you to go ahead and put those bean seeds into the almost filled container of soil. I want you to water in the seeds, wet the soil thoroughly. After you water them in the first time, of course, you're going to have to keep checking on them to make sure that the soil stays moist. I want you to place that cup after you have everything watered in and your seeds planted. I want you to place that cup right next to a window. So you're going to need to choose an out of the way window if you can. If you have a window sill, like a little ledge or shelf on your window, that's a great place for it as long as they can stay there. But I want you to put your cups with the seeds in them right next to a window. And just over the next week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, I want you to watch these seeds grow. I want you to make some sketches in your notebook. And I want you, when the seeds have germinated and they begin growing, I want you to watch for phototropism. When does it happen? Does it happen? And really, are the plants bending towards the light? That's the thing I want you to look for. Now, of course, after you've got the plants up and they're a little bit bigger, feel free to do some other experimentation. You could play with geotropism. Can you get that plant to respond to gravity? You might want to play with some hydrotropism. Can you get it to respond to water? Feel free, once you have your plants in these containers, to either lay the plant over on its side and play around with some geotropism. You may want to water in a very particular way and see if you can get the plant to respond to hydrotropism. But it can be a lot of fun to watch these happen. So I hope you'll give this a shot. It doesn't take a lot of materials. It just takes a little patience. So I guess that does it for today. So until next time, stay curious.